And when my front tires hit it, it detonated a roadside bomb large enough that when it hit my door, I mean, this vehicle was 9,000 pounds. It sent it flying through the air and landing in a canal running adjacent to the road. And they said the water was up to my chest, a huge hole in my jaw. My arm was already taken off. Like, thankfully, it landed wheels down because we would have drowned.
Your story definitely intrigued me because my father died on September 11th. And I know a part of what I've heard you speak on and what I've read up on, if I'm mistaken, you enlisted shortly after 9/11?
Yes. Yep. It was I was in college. Yeah, I was in college when 9/11 happened, and I watched it. I was in Alabama, but I watched all of it go down. I was watching as we were worried about everyone in the first building, the first World Trade Tower Center, before that second plane hit. And when I saw that second plane hit, I've always told people I have not forgotten the people as the cameraman was recording and that second plane hit. Everyone around it screamed, and because at first everyone was talking about pilot error, and then it went from that to we were a country under attack, and then all the devastation that came from it. And yeah, that's how I ended up in the military.
So that was the driving force. It was September 11th.
It was, yes. Yeah. I never went back to class after that.
Directly, literally that day, didn't literally just dropped out?
Yeah, just never went back. Never even officially dropped out. It wasn't until years later I was at the VA. This is after I was injured and everything. And I was looking to enroll in school, and I was like, oh, they won't accept it because I still have transcripts at UAV and I owe them money. And somebody at the VA was like, have you looked into that? Like, maybe we could call somebody. So he called and explained to the people at UAB what had happened because I owed them this money. It wasn't a lot. It was my first semester. And they're like, yeah, tell them it's good. It's all gone. So
that's pretty wild to me, especially. It's super powerful because, I mean, this episode is not about me. We're going to get into you. But specifically to me, I was 12 years old when my dad died in the towers. And part of me growing up, I was like, I don't know what it was. I know I was young, but I feel like I always had a regretful, I don't know if it was guilt or regret or whatever, that I didn't do something. I mean, what could I do? And the answer is maybe, what you did. And I always thought about that. I mean, granted, I wasn't even old enough to enlist, but at the same time, I always thought back to that day now being 32 and thinking of an action like you took, like something obviously hit you and you weren't even in the military at any point before that. So I'm curious, what drove you to do that? Was it just the horrifying aspect of it? Was there anything?
I think, to be brutally honest, I love sharing the story to people, the patriotism aspect of it. But there was also, if we're going to be completely honest, there was a side of me that the military wasn't an option because we weren't at war. And it completely changed the desire to be in the military when it was like, we're going to go to war. And so there was this whole nother side of things that was just wanting to be in this action. And that can sound kind of rough, to some people. But then it was once, so I went to Iraq, was in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And once I got to Iraq, I realized how much I just enjoyed working with other people of other cultures, other backgrounds, because we lived with the locals. A very small percentage of us lived with the locals on our deployments, and I loved it. I enjoyed the excitement of being in combat and the uncertainty of things and the risk, but then I also enjoyed just being with the people. So it's like there's so many different realms of what got me in the military and what made me love it. That has so many different. So when I think of someone like you, you were 12 years old. There was nothing you could do. In fact, it was more of, I think it's led you on the path to do a podcast like this that talks about a subject that people don't ever want to talk about, even though we all think about it. Every one of us do.
Right. I appreciate that, man. And thank you for your service and everything you do and what you continue to do, after your journey's I feel like it's just beginning and you've done so much. So I would love to hear, I know a lot of people already know about you, but I don't know where you want to start. I would love to hear your origin story in regards to, what happened to you in 2003. Was it 2003 or was your second tour?
Yep.
3 months in?
So it was 2005.
Sorry,
So
2005.
2003 is when we invaded Iraq.
Mhm.
And I was with the 101st. Our division commander was General Petraeus. He designed the way that the entire military went into Iraq, because there was all these different discussions. Different countries didn't want to be involved. I mean, because, it could be argued today whether that was even necessary, but we won't get into that. There's
that's another podcast.
But, yeah. For me, though, so going on that first deployment was interesting because you do, as an infantry soldier, I do feel like the better soldiers accept death. And so you go not expecting to come back, and not everybody can, I don't know. I may have just been the crazy person that was like, okay, you know what? This is what's going to happen. And I survived the first deployment. The second deployment was different because as I left, I had a son that was born between the two deployments. And so my second deployment, I was leaving him behind. And that was really difficult. I carried his picture with me everywhere I went. And there were moments in Iraq that I remember thinking, I hope he never experiences anything like this his entire life. And then to be injured, I still had accepted death, but I did not prepare myself to wake up in a hospital and be in between. Here it was, the career was over. I'd found a career. Once I got in, I loved it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Even if that meant my life was going to be cut short, I did not expect to wake up and be severely injured. And that was really hard on me, extremely hard on me. And when I tell people that I went through a lot of depression, it wasn't just the fact that I lost an arm and a leg. I didn't know who I was anymore, where I was going in life. That depression that a lot of our veterans go through, it's not just the veteran community. It's anybody that loses their direction. NFL players have a high suicide rate because, you've played football from 8 until you're 30, and been in the big, played in the Super Bowl or something like that. And all of a sudden your career's over.
Right.
And they don't know where they're going. And that's where I was for several years. That's where I struggled. And there were moments that I did think, I wish I would have died over there, because then I would have been looked at like a hero and I wouldn't have to deal with any of this stuff. Now, I don't feel that way now. I have had a lot of changes in my life that have sent me in another direction. And I feel like I have to follow up with, I am not that guy anymore. You just reach a certain age, and I have 3 children and my wife and even my cat and my dog, so I've got this nice life. And, I don't know. Ever since I turned 40, I'm not saying I fear death, but it crosses my mind all the time now.
It's so interesting, especially
not
from
as bad
you.
Went from not caring to, oh crap, what if something happens? What if I taught my kids enough? What's going to happen to them afterwards? So yeah, it's a very interesting topic. When my wife said that you had reached out about doing this podcast and Dead Talks, and I was like, really? Like, I had to think about it. And then I was like, then she read the email again to me. I was like, let's definitely do that. Like, that is so intriguing. I am on a trip right now. I'm in Cabo, which is crazy that I'm here. I have a friend of mine who has this incredible house that is like, yeah, go use it. I'm right here. I'm looking at the ocean, and we're going to go out on a boat tomorrow. And the reason we're here is my mother-in-law last spring was diagnosed with extremely rare cancer. And we didn't even know if she'd make it through the holidays. And one of her things was she wants to see the whales. And last fall we went to Maui, but it wasn't the right time of year. So it didn't happen. The whole trip was just, it was a good trip, but it just wasn't what we were going to do. And then this came up. I reached out to my friend and said, hey, can we use your place? He's like, done. Then he set us up with a boat we're going out on, and the whales are everywhere. The minute we got here, within the first, while just sitting on the back deck, we saw 5 whales. You know what I mean?
No way.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So that's why I'm where I'm at. And it's real interesting to do this podcast right now, because we're here because of a woman in our family who is facing death and it's been a topic of conversation of, would you rather know? Oh, wait a minute. Siri just, what?
You can bring her in. She had anything to say?
Siri just popped up. Hold on. Let me, my God.
God damn it, Siri.
Hold on. Hold on. All right. How do we get back to the studio? Let's see. Dang it. There we go. Hold on. So my wife walked away too soon. I don't know how to control anything. But so going back, yeah. So then it's the conversation. Would you rather know it's coming, or have it be surprise? Sounds a little
No, I know
too
what you mean.
lighthearted, but yeah, not expecting it, because my father-in-law, when his father died, I think he was in a car wreck or something, but the police came and told him he was a child. And it's like, what's worse? You know what I mean? Watching this person know that it's coming and you're trying to do everything for them, or for it to just happen.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure
I mean, that's
had
the
that
$1 million
conversation
question. But it's interesting because with you, it was like, I feel like you had a little bit of both. This is just my own interpretation. Like you're going into war, kind of accepting that it might happen, and I feel like it's like an in between, because it's like a very, you're facing death. I feel like at any moment going into a
and it was actually easier.
Was it?
For me, yes. Feeling like I had control, saying, oh, if I go, I chose this.
Right.
Because I remember I had that conversation with my mom, because growing up, my mom always pushed me to join the military. And I was like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. She grew up a military brat. Her family's all military. So she thought it made sense.
Right.
And when I did join, I sat down with her and let her know, hey, I chose this. Whatever happens, I didn't want to go and her think that she pushed me into the military, because it wasn't until I decided. And so I felt like I was in control. So it did make it easier. And then now here it is, you fast forward, I'm 40, and there's all this talk of death and all these different things. And I can't help but think, oh, can I prevent it? You know what I mean? Is there anything I can do to keep it from happening now? Because it's like, well, I want to help my kids as they grow up. They're now teenagers, and I want to help them become adults. And then when they become adults, I'm like, well, I need to see them get married. Well, I need to see them have kids. But eventually that's going to run out. None of us know when that time is going to be. And it's interesting. You always hear about, turning 40 or middle-aged men, and then, midlife crisis. It was when I turned 40 last year, it did. Like, it's getting to where it's not as bad as it was, but the last few months, it has been something that has constantly haunted me more than I've admitted to anybody around me. My wife doesn't even know that I have stressed over death.
So that's so interesting to me. It's such a unique thing to talk about with you. Like we've already beaten with the hammer, but you told me that when you went into war, you went into your first deployment, you were like, you seem cool with it from what you're telling with me, and then fast forward 10 years later, when things seem to have calmed down, I would say, now you're thinking about it. It's like, what is that? What is that?
Yeah, like,
is that children? Is that age?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, it is really strange. It's obviously in my head. You know what I mean? You go through different stages in your life and the way you view things and where your priorities are. And, I think, just like I told you when I said, to be brutally honest, the real thing that intrigued me to military was going to war. You know what I mean? Testing myself as a man. I was that kid. Like, I worked and, landscaping, construction, worked in a plant, anything that was, just felt like just a masculine job. That's what I went after. So war was this test of myself. But then it was also this greed, this selfishness that I had inside. That's why, like, I kind of feel bad when people thank me for my service, because it's like, no, it was all selfishness that led me there. And so then that same selfishness did not care if I died. So I think it was ignorance. Not that people should fear death, but back then it wasn't so much like I was this, Buddhist monk that had it all figured out. You know what I mean? I didn't have anything figured out, but I was okay with death. And then you fast forward, and, my life, and with my children and my family. I mean, I know it's going to come one day, and I hope, people mourn me, but I don't want it to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
So
Wait, so you were, I know, I feel like there's so much. I mean, what the hell do I know? I've never experienced a fraction of what you've experienced. And I wonder, how you were, what, like 18, 19, 20? What were you then? You said
I
you're
was
40
20.
now, so 20
I
years
was
ago?
20.
20? Right.
Yep.
I wonder if was it like this the speed of the things happen? So does the military have any kind of reinforcement or discussion around death? Or is it just like
No.
they punch you to the mouth, figure it out?
Well, it's kind of I mean, the military is evolving. Every group of guys say, "Oh, it's softer now." No, they're trying to figure out how we take care of our mental stability. I don't think the military is getting
Right.
weaker. I think we're figuring things out. And at a time that I was in, I mean, it is 20 years is a long time ago. Um, there was you didn't hesitate to discuss death like it's going to happen, but there was no preparation. When we lost our first, when my friend Ravago died in our first deployment, that took a hit on all of us. And then you kind of held that emotion in. And it eventually came out, whether on the deployment or for some of us, it was months after we returned home. Like we've all gotten together and said, "Oh, then one night I just had this complete come apart and just broke down emotionally, and it was because we held it." And then the second deployment, we lost a lot more guys, and there were new guys that had never experienced it yet. So I remember when we lost our first guys on our second deployment, I didn't sleep at all that night because all these different guys wanted to come and talk to me and how I dealt with it the first time and this and that. So we talked about it. But it's not anything that is set in place. It wasn't then by the military to prepare you for the emotional effects that death is going to have on you and the stress of worrying about it. I had a buddy of mine, Hector, that on our second deployment, like he didn't even have to shave anymore. He started losing hair by patches, and then it just quit growing on his face. And
Oh
it was
shit.
stress. When he got home, it went back to normal, but it was all stress related. And not, it was the stress of what was going on about the death around us. So it was and I guess for me, it was a safety mechanism to be like, no, not worried about it. Don't care. And just going to do what I have to do and hopefully go out as a hero. And then ended up being injured, and it changed my entire outlook.
Yeah, I mean, you said if you wished you passed because you said that would make you a hero, but I mean, clearly you are a hero. There's obviously no doubt about that. I'm sure you've accepted that by now. So it's pretty crazy, especially your mentality. Sorry,
it
what were you
is
saying?
very interesting. It's been, yeah, no, I mean, you're exactly right. And if I hadn't, now I'm thankful that just injured. I mean, now looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, I lost an arm and a leg. Yeah, it was traumatic in the beginning. It's been 16 years now. It's who I am. I'm not worried about it. And I find a way to take pride, like in my fitness and things I do. I love to go places and people see I'm missing an arm and a leg and I'm fit and I do things. You know what I mean? So I've used it to my advantage. But then also, I mean, my other son, so my oldest son, Colston, was before my second deployment, but my son, Jack, and my daughter, Ryan, all came after my injury. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. I was talking to my son, Jack. He was asking about my injury. We got into more detail the other day. He's 14 now. And we were talking. And then I said to him, I said, yeah, if I would, that bomb would have been just a little different or hit me in a different way, you wouldn't even be here right now, And it was just crazy to think that all the things that would have changed.
And that's a conversation you've had with him, mentioning that he
Yes,
wouldn't be here, because that's a big conversation. Because I always wonder
it is.
the conversation of, like, I feel like from man to man, like this is a rare conversation in some sense. It's just a whatever the tabooness about men talking about shit like this, or how you feel, quote unquote. The other wave of talking to your kids about this, the idea that you want to protect your children as much as possible, and I think this is a conversation about death that people just don't want to speak about in general. But it seems like that was a way of talking about it with your son mentioning that.
Yes. And there's a fine line. I mean, I feel like I don't want to take away my children's youth. I don't want them to, there's some things in the world they'll find out later. I'll be there to help them when they get to that age, but I don't want them to worry about things too soon. But at the same time, you do want to have certain conversations. And I don't know how long it would be. Something could happen today to me. You know what I mean? And I don't want to think that I didn't, because one thing, like my father and I didn't talk about emotions, but with my kids, I tell them, hey, it is okay to be upset. You know, we talk about those things. It's okay to let things bother you, you know, and then to be upset when something happens. And now, because, you know, with my mother-in-law, my kids love her, and so that has led to that discussion being a lot more like this is what's going to happen, and it's tough. It's really tough to talk
Yeah.
about.
And I know, and especially I can,
But I
like I
think
said,
it's
you went through a
necessary. It
totally.
is necessary.
Is that how
Well,
you?
yeah. I
Is that
mean,
how you
think about
healed?
it. You were 12.
I was
Um,
12. Yeah.
yeah. Is that how I healed? You mean which
Well, I'm
part?
saying from what I'm gathering, and correct me if I'm completely off the mark here, but how you're explaining to your kids, it's okay to feel, and then you told me, like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Is
going to be
that
in
how?
different. Stay with me here, because I'm going to be going. I might be sounding
Okay.
crazy the way
Okay. Okay.
I'm pulling these things together, but
All right.
you said something about in regards to not being scared to death, like. You kind of, it sounded like you like just push it away. Like, yeah, I'm here. I made my decision. I'm going to be good with this. So it almost sounds like suppress. I can't tell if I can never tell the difference between if it's acceptance or suppression. But then you told your kids
Yeah.
how it's important to feel. And to me, that is the biggest thing is like we either suppress, repress, or push away how we feel. And then it ends up showing up later in so many ways.
Yes.
But in regards to after you had that roadside bomb and your life changed forever, we haven't got into that yet, whether you want to or not, but you obviously went through a lot emotionally and mentally. So part of
Mhm.
that healing, was it you realizing that it's okay to feel what you're feeling? Was it the acceptance of how you
Yes.
felt?
Yes. You know, because there's still a side of me that is bad about suppressing things. Me and my wife. My wife's very open and loves to, everybody has to be happy, and she's amazing, good for me.
That's great. Yeah.
But I do suppress things to this day, and I'm working on it. But I don't want, and those bad habits I don't want to pass on to my children. So that's why we have the conversations, because it's to, if I've come as far as I have with a father who didn't, and my mom didn't talk about emotions. My mom was as tough as I mean, she was probably tougher because she came from the military side of the family, and they just you didn't share things. And if I have come as far as I have in my 40 years, well, then if I can start this conversation with my children as their children, well, then who knows where it's going to take them in their lives. Because I think, because it is, like you said, if you suppress it, it comes out in other ways. If I have talked about this on stage to audiences with my children, everybody, is when I do allow my emotions to come out, even if I have to go sit in the shower and be upset, um, if you get upset, if you cry, if you show emotion, you know what? If I don't, it comes out as anger somewhere else. You know what I mean? Because like I tell the kids, I'm like, one day you're going to be driving and somebody's going to piss you off on the road. You know what? Somebody's just mad already.
Yep.
Let them go through. You know what I mean? Some people are just mad. It's because they're not letting their emotions out. We see them in the gas station. That person that walks in that just looks angry, because they're suppressing a whole bunch of emotions, and you can't let that happen. And I don't want my kids to go through that. I want them to be able to express themselves and let it be able to share with me or with someone else when something's bothering them. And especially when it comes to kids. I mean, like I was in Iowa the other day I spoke to a group of eighth grade, then seventh grade, then sixth grade. And each time I talked about mental health. And the other day I got a message on Instagram from one of the kids, from a seventh grader, who said, "Thank you for talking about mental health. Too often grown-ups think we don't have any problems, but it's so stressful." And because I was like, I know it is. I remember what I said to that group of seventh graders. I said, I remember being in seventh grade and I would never go back, and they all
That shit
laughed,
is hard,
because it
man.
is. That's when you're going through. Yeah. And for any adult to think, what do kids have to worry about? That's when they're going through changes mentally, emotionally, physically, and they don't know what's going on in the world. And then you got all this other stuff going on, and news is so accessible now. So it's a lot they can get in their head and they can worry about. And yeah, that's why and so to think that kids don't have mental health issues, well, then why do we have kids that commit suicide? It's a real issue that needs to be addressed, and it's by talking. It's about letting them know it's okay to share your emotions. It's okay to talk about death. It's okay to talk about all these things.
So is that the premise behind you still have a charity, right? Called No Excuses?
Yeah. So my No Excuses Charitable Fund, I started. It started because, okay, so when I got injured and I was going through my depression and my struggles, there was a couple of organizations that I had linked in with for injured veterans. And at first they wanted to use me. And then I started asking too many questions and they kind of just tossed me aside.
Huh.
And it sent me into another deeper, dark depression because I felt like, okay, I've lost the military. Now this organization doesn't even want me. And it's because I was in this bad place in my life and they weren't willing to put in the work. But then I used that to my advantage and said, you know what? I'm going to outshine that organization. And I ended up doing that. In fact, I got involved with groups, races that supported this organization, and they dropped them because of me. Once I started talking and getting things out, I don't throw that name out there because that's not the reasoning. That organization has actually improved dramatically. After several years, they finally got rid of their leadership and changed things. So that's good, but I don't work with them. Don't badmouth them, just move on. But I started my charitable fund because I did realize not all charities are equal. And so my charitable fund, what it does is when I find organizations that do actually do the work they claim they do, well, then I support them. So it's a charity that certain things I do, the money goes in there, and then I send money, but not all veterans groups. Like I send money to my local YMCA. My charitable fund donates a lot to the YMCA because my kids played sports there. Mm-hmm. I got into to fitness at a young age, and I felt like fitness helped me in my depression as I came out. And so I'm like, hey, let's keep these kids active. And I put a lot of money into the YMCA because I see it working. Homes for our troops, build houses for injured veterans, sheepdog impact assistance. They work with veterans and also post-traumatic stress, and not just covering it up, but accepting it. They call it falling forward. You know what I mean? Saying, okay, I have these issues. What can I do to improve them, help them? And I love that. So I just had my first charity golf event, and we were able to give $10,000 to sheepdog impact assistance. So that's the charitable fund was something to help me highlight organizations that are legit.
That's awesome. It's unique too. I mean, maybe there's a lot out there. I don't know.
Most people start their own.
Yeah, that seems pretty badass.
I love it because and like the other day I was in Clarksville, Tennessee, gave a speech. It was last week. And it was Operation Stand Down. And what I loved about it was an annual breakfast, their 7th year of this annual breakfast. And it wasn't just their organization. There were all these other veterans groups that were there. And I said, that's why I'm here and sharing my time and story, because this is the way it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? When you have one charity trying to pull out of the pot away from everyone else, well, that does no good. And I've seen that with a lot of organizations. They want it all for themselves, and they're getting greedy. And it's like, okay, well, why did you start this? To work with veterans? Well, then each group has their different thing to offer, and that's what's important.
That's amazing. I never heard of a charity that supports other other foundations and other causes. That's the most. I don't even know what the fuck. I'm trying not to curse so much in this podcast. I still come from Jersey, New York, so it comes out. So I apologize.
Yeah.
I want to take a step back to what you said earlier when you first started talking about No Excuses. So the organization that you were involved with prior, you said that you were asking too many questions. What does that mean?
Well, because their higher ups weren't doing the right thing. They had their good old boy system where, certain people they would use for things, and the way they were raising money and the way they were spending, that's how they got in trouble, was the way they were spending their money.
So questions about how they operated.
Yeah. And they didn't like that. And I was told years later by people that quit before the transition happened, while those people, and they told me, they said, they had said specifically, Noah Galloway will not be part of any of our stuff anymore, and started pushing people out. And it was ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. Like you said, it was a blessing. It's all those things. I feel like when something like that happens, it feels like what the hell what's going on, but then it turns into your own shit. So, that sounded like a blessing in disguise.
It did. Oh, without a doubt. And for years, a couple of years ago, I was like, I got to find something that is, to really push me. What has gotten me in the past going? Well, it's always been being mad at somebody or something. So every time I've been successful, it's because I was trying to prove something to someone else. And now I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to just be mad at somebody. There's got to be another way.
Yeah, I'm reading. It's fun. It's wild that you say that because I'm reading a book right now that mentions that it's kind of along the lines of what you're saying. How a lot of people use it's a common thing. Like anger can motivate people, or fear can
Yeah.
motivate people. But the book started asking the question, like, why do I have to be angry to do this? Why can't I be happy to
Yeah.
do this? Or so and so. It's kind of like rearranging the semantics of it. But you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's like as good as that driving force was, that you used it in your advantage. It's like shit. I don't want to be angry all the time. Can I do this and be happy? That's an amazing.
Yeah.
That's a badass little awareness right there.
Yeah, and that's why I like talking about my charity and supporting other charities. I think because then there is this comfort that comes with knowing you're doing something for someone else, and that's something we've all heard, experienced. I tell my kids, I'm like, nothing compares to the enjoyment you get when you do something for someone else. I mean, it's that's the truth. I mean, I've never been disappointed when I was able to put a smile on someone else's face. So that's where the charitable fund has been another big blessing that goes from the angry side to the happy side. That's like, hey, now I'm doing something for others.
Right. And is that part of your process? You said, how 20 years later after the military, going from not so fearful of death and, being in war to, having, settled, like not, I don't know if you're settling down, but you're doing so much, but it's not war, even though I feel like some aspects of life every day are a little tough. But is this part of your process of being comfortable again with death? I feel like you're like in like a different mode right now of, thinking about death more than you were.
Yes. Yeah. I mention it and, kind of laugh about it, but it hasn't been like, it doesn't ruin my life. It's not something that I need to go see a specialist about. It's just something that stays in my head and I think about from time to time. Cause like I fly all the time. I'm flying all over the place and I don't like turbulence doesn't bother me, but there has been times like it's jolted me and I thought, oh my God, what if something did happen? And I start thinking about the kids and all this stuff. But I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's an interesting time in my life that I'm looking at things completely different than I did before. And there's a part of me that's like, well, I don't need to stress about that. But then there's also a part of me that's glad I'm not the selfish kid I was before. Because,
you're a kid.
death is inevitable. Yeah. Death is inevitable and it's going to happen, but I shouldn't sit around stressing about it because none of us can do anything about it when it does happen.
Yeah, I love that. It seems like you're really mastering the idea of just letting things go, and I feel like that is it's a lot easier said than done. I'm trying to figure that shit out too. So I commend you for being aware of that.
I think about how you said you were 12 years old when you lost your father, and here it was already an event that everyone was aware of, but it really came down to, it doesn't matter if it was on September 11th or September 12th. It was huge on your life and how it impacted you. And, when I think about stuff like that, I'm like, oh, what can I do for my children? To hope that, because I would love to know that if something happened to me, they would become successful and start a genius podcast.
I appreciate
like
that.
You did, which is all led from where you came from. I know you've had your struggles, your ups, your downs. I'm sure sometimes it's still not easy. This might be a grieving process for you to do this podcast. And you know what? Others are going to benefit from your experiences and where you're going through in your life. And that's all we can really do.
Amen. No, I appreciate the words. And, it's ironic. I've mentioned this before, but it's ironic how part of me, my dad happened to die on the biggest stage that everyone knows about. So I always got this attention from it, and I'm grateful for it because I've been, I can't even take any responsibility for getting through it because I have so many people support around me, and it always reflected the idea of this podcast was to shine the light on people like you. In regards to sharing other stories, like I know you said it, it's like my experiences hopefully reflect some aspect of this podcast, but it's really about you and your stories and sharing other stories. Because part of me is like, yeah, I always get that text on 9/11 because everyone knows it's on 9/11. It's a date people remember. Some people that died on XYZ don't get those texts because it wasn't recognized as a global event in the public eye. So I think I'm going on a rant right now, but I think that's the point of the discussion we're having is to share other people's stories, and hopefully, my insights help somewhat. But in regards to, if you don't mind me hopping around, I probably should have started this from the beginning. But what do you remember from that day of, on your second tour?
When I got injured?
Yeah.
So I don't remember the injury at all. In fact, I didn't know if I remember. It was December 19th of 2005 when the explosion happened. And as I laid in the hospital bed, I didn't wake up for 5-6 days. I was kind of, they also had me in an induced coma on all kind of pain meds. So I didn't really know what was going on. But then I wasn't sure if I even remember the month of December. And then I got a phone call from a buddy of mine that was in the Humvee with me that he was injured, but not as severely. He went through Germany, but ended up back at Fort Campbell, going to physical therapy there and then working things from the rear. And he called me and he was able to say, "Do you remember doing this?" And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "That's the day before." And he's like, "Do you remember doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "That's the day of." And then he was like, "Do you remember doing this?" I was like, "No." He said, "That was an hour before the explosion." Like, I don't remember even leaving. It was actually a night that I didn't have to be in the Humvee, and I insisted I go and drive the lead vehicle. And we would drive in 2005 with our headlights off, night vision goggles on. And with night vision goggles, you can see well, but you can't see everything. And what I didn't see was Siri's about to pop up again. Hold on.
She has something to say. We should just let her loose.
Right. I know. What I didn't see that night was a tripwire. And when my front tires hit it, it detonated a roadside bomb large enough that when it hit my door, this vehicle was 9,000 pounds. It sent it flying through the air and landing in a canal running adjacent to the road. And they said the water was up to my chest, a huge hole in my jaw. My arm was already taken off. Like, thankfully it landed wheels down because we would have drowned. So they were able to get me out and get me back to where we were, this potato factory we were living out of, and medics worked on me. Helicopter picked me up, took me to a camp outside of Baghdad. Doctors worked on me there. From there to Germany, and Germany to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in D.C. And I got there on Christmas Day. And I remember a little bit of Germany, but it was kind of in and out. And then I remember waking up on Christmas night as my parents got to the hospital.
Holy shit.
And for my family, it was.
Do you remember waking up? Do you remember waking up and what goes through your mind?
So I remember waking up. It was dark in the room and there was light outside, and my parents came in. And so usually the parents are prepped and meet with somebody and they talk, and as they start to wake up, or if they can. Well, my parents got there. It was in the middle of the night because they were going to fly them to Germany. Usually they fly families to Germany when, hey, they're just going to keep us on life support until the family gets there and can say their goodbyes. And so then they called my parents like, "Wait a minute, he's doing good enough. We're going to get him to Walter Reed." So then their flights were changed. They got there in the middle of the night, and they ended up finding my room and coming right in without knowing anything. And when I saw my mom, something in the back of my mind said, "Smile so she knows you're okay." I don't know why I thought that. And it was funny because years later, I gave a speech and they asked her to introduce me. And in her introduction, she mentioned the first time she walked in the room, she didn't know what to expect, what condition her son was going to be in. And she walked in the room and I smiled at her and she was like, "It's going to be okay." And I was like, "Oh." So then when I gave my speech, I was like, me and my mom have never talked about this, but I talk about that same experience from my side. And it was this weird kind of just, I wanted her to know everything was okay. And it worked. Of course, then I went through hell finding out what actually happened. And, it went through a part of my life that I'm actually thankful for, the depression I went through that lasted about 5 years, if I was going to be completely honest. But it was a stage in my life that was necessary. If people ask me if I'd do it all over again, without a doubt. If I hadn't have been blown up, lost 2 of my limbs, gone through that depression, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be the father I am today or the husband. The man I am today is because of those trials and tribulations that I went through, and I'm thankful for them.
Jesus, mic drop. If my mic wasn't on a friggin' tripod right now, I'd drop it. That was, you said so many things that are just so I mean, wise, mature, commendable. It's like you're saying you're thankful for your depression, your depression you had for 5 years. I never hear that. Going through what you went through.
But if I hadn't went through that depression, I wouldn't be as comfortable talking about it on stage, whether I'm in front of a group of students or professional adults, whatever it is. I bring it up every time I'm on stage because I tell people, I'm like, you know what? I am a big advocate of mental health, so I cannot be up here and not touch on. And when I did my book, I wrote a book, Living with No Excuses. And it talks about my childhood. It talks about Dancing with the Stars, all these other things. But the meat of it, the heart of the book is I am brutally honest about my depression. Because there's a lot of people that know my story that's like, oh, here's a guy, got blown up, lost his arm and leg, ended up on the cover of Men's Health, came in third on Dancing with the Stars. He's done pretty well. But that's not reality. Reality is there's an entire chapter dedicated to me spending 10 days in the county jail. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of mistakes I made. And when I did my book, it was painful to talk about them again because I had to relive them. But then it was like, okay, this is necessary. I was terrified people were going to read it and hate me because all these people that loved me on Dance with the Stars saw me as this Southern gentleman. I was so nice and doing my best. But then this book is like this other side. And I was afraid that people were going to hate me, but I kept telling myself it's necessary because I knew if one person read it who was going through that, they could know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I have had so many people, not just veterans, not just people with disabilities, people reach out to me that have read my book and connected to it because of the way they felt or someone they knew. And I thought that was really important. So yeah, that's why I say that depression was important because it gives me a mindset and an experience that I can now share with others and relate to people and hopefully help someone like that student that reached out to me. I mean, if the fact that he reached out and said, thank you for talking about mental health and how we do struggle, that means that kid has thought about it. He is struggling. And me saying, hey, if you're there's nothing wrong with asking for help or knowing someone and getting them help. Talking to a fellow student to get you help or a teacher or a parent, whatever it is, you have to do it, to take that away to say, and I feel like it's a nice thing for a guy that these kids may look at as, very masculine. You know what I mean? Here's a guy that went to war, lost arm and leg, did all these races, did one that was a 58-hour race, did all these crazy things. Then I'm saying it's okay to be upset. It is okay to be emotional and it's okay to ask for help. I think that's a huge impact to put on kids.
Yeah, kids, men, anyone. Honestly, anyone. Like you hit the nail on the head in regards to someone of your image of strength, bravery, courage. You were in war. You went through what you went, and your willingness to share the story. You hit the nail on the head. It's huge, and it's something about just hearing someone else express it really does have a cascading effect on so many people. So, your bravery to go to war is one thing, then your bravery to speak about it is a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I appreciate that. And
I was going to say, I know that you said in the beginning, this podcast is about your guest, but I can't stress enough. Just like I told you, when Amanda said, hey, this is the podcast that reached out, I was like, wow, and I was so excited about this because I think what you're doing with your podcast I think it's huge. Because it isn't talked about, whether it's, death, which leads to talking about, like we're talking about depression. I think that these are conversations that need to be had. And I commend you on it. I think this is an incredible idea and platform. And I'm honored that you even asked me to be on it.
I appreciate that coming from you. I know you don't know me very well and it's a first conversation, but that means a lot. Seriously. It's, especially someone that's had a story like you and is doing what you're doing, that definitely it's high praise right there. So thank you. And the honor is on this side of the camera. I promise you that. I know you got a lot going on, so I'll let you go, but I want to ask you, just maybe one more thing in regards to that 5-year path that you had, battling depression. It might be a loaded question and I don't think you could package one answer in 5 years, but what is there anything that specifically helped you? I'm sure there's many things that you are illustrating to other people when you lecture and when you talk to people about dealing with mental health and all that.
Yep. Okay. So, when I share with people, especially when I'm on stage, I'm sharing my story, I always tell them that, life is not a movie. Just because, things need to get better, they don't just work that way. But one thing I did have in my life and continue to have in my life are my 3 children. And I bring them up because one day I walked into the living room and my 3 kids, very young at the time, were sitting on the couch watching cartoons. And when I walked in and looked at them, this terrifying thought hit me. I realized to my 2 boys, I'm showing them what a man is, and that's what they're going to become one day. And to my little girl, I'm showing her how a man's supposed to act, and that's what she's going to look for one day. And I was not the man that I wanted my boys to be or my daughter to find. So I knew I had to make a change. And going back to life's not a movie, it doesn't just fix. Even though I knew I needed to make a change, I still made mistakes. But every time I screwed up and fell flat on my face, the thought of my 3 children was the motivation to get up and just try a little harder and go a little further. So I always tell people, find that thing in your life that is bigger than your fears. I mean, books talk about it all the time. Find your why, all these, that's what it is. Finding that thing, because I loved, especially I was talking to these kids the other day and I was telling them that most people, everyone's going to hit an obstacle in life. It doesn't matter who you are, some sort of obstacle is going to hit you. And average people stop there. They're like, okay, well, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm going. But exceptional people find a way to go over, around, under, or through that obstacle to get to the other side. And then to keep pushing themselves for more. And that's what I did. And my children, every time something would be like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I'm making a point for my children. And I'm teaching them lessons. And when I made the cover of Men's Health and then went on Ellen DeGeneres' shows wanted me. Survivor called me. I loved the show, but was like, I can't do it because I couldn't be away from my kids that long. Another show called. I turned them down. When Dancing with the Stars called me, I told them no because they said they'd put me in a house in L.A. for the duration of the time I was there. I said, I was like, I got 3 kids here in Alabama. They're more important than a television show. And without hesitation, Dina Cass, the executive producer, said, that's okay. We'll send the dancer to Alabama. You'll rehearse there all week and fly back and forth to L.A. for the live show. I'm like, oh, crap. I guess, I didn't have an argument then. So that's how I ended up on that show. But everything in my life revolves around my children and my wife, and being this family man. That's the world I'm in now. That's the world I'm in now, and it's what's got me through that depression. I always tell people, find that thing that is more powerful than your fears. And I stress when I say, the obstacles that we go over, around, under, or through, that doesn't mean you have to bust through them like the Kool-Aid man. Sometimes it's about saying, hey, I need to step back, and I maybe I should talk to a professional. And I tell that to everybody. Most complicated organ you have is right here. And, if you had heart problems and you saw a cardiologist, well, your friends, how's everything going? Since you had your, everything's going good. I'm doing great. I just want to check on you. Well, what's wrong with when people have issues with their head? Well, then why do we judge people? We shouldn't. Siri tried to
That's
pop
so
up
true.
again.
It's a great analogy. Like anything else, you break your arm, you hurt anything went wrong with your heart, they do ask what's wrong. But health, for some reason, is that stigma.
You get a professional. Yes. The whole, like the no excuses mantra I use, I remind people all the time, it's not always a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mantra. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes no excuses means there's no excuse not to take care of yourself. And one of the examples I use sometimes, like think of a relative that maybe smokes a lot. You don't see that as much anymore, but someone who smokes, and you're like, you should probably quit smoking. It's not good for you. Well, you got to die of something. You know what I mean? Well, I love to throw to them, what if you don't immediately die? What if your smoking puts you in such a horrible state that your children have to stop what they're doing in their lives to take care of you? That stops people dead in their steps because no one wants to be a burden. And, sometimes I use that as an example to say, hey, take care of yourself because you know what? You may not care about yourself, but you want yourself to break down and it be a burden on someone else. No, you got to take care of yourself.
I feel like I almost blacked out for a second because you made me think of so many different things, and that analogy of being a burden on someone else just woke up some things that I'm not going to put on this podcast right now. I'll keep that one to myself. Thank you for that. That is absolutely brilliant. you have I don't even know you very well, but I'm proud of everything you're doing, and I'm looking forward to following you on this journey. And I suck at golf, but if you ever have any tournaments or any events through your charity and anywhere, I would love to maybe participate and help out as
Yeah.
much as I can.
What area are you in?
I live in LA. I'm in Los Angeles.
LA. Okay. I'll tell you what, we're going to be out there because Amanda lived in Venice Beach for a while. And that's where I moved her from. I was like, you need to come to Alabama, and we packed her stuff up and drove across the country. But yeah, we have a lot of friends there, and I would love to actually just get together in person with you.
That would be an honor.
And just meet you one day.
I would absolutely love that.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely do that. We will do that.
Yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch. And your wife is an absolute sweetheart. I know we only spoke via email, but the way she was so sweet it came through. So I do want to thank her as well. I know we've been communicating. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so thankful that you came on here. And if there's anything I could do to help in any way whatsoever, I hope it does. The relationship doesn't end here, because it's an honor to talk to you. You have so much to learn from.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're gonna see each other in LA, and if I can get you out to Alabama on September 17th of this year to play golf. If you don't want to play golf, I'll use you as a volunteer. Yep.
Dude, I would actually take you up. I've never been to Alabama. Okay. So I think I saw that on your website. I saw something. So let me look into that, and I'll put my money where my mouth is. I would love to come.
Yeah, since you mentioned that, I can go ahead and drop NoahGalloway.com is my website, and you can track all my social media, and there's a link to the golf tournament. So I think that the registration is going to go live, I think in a month or so. I think that's what Amanda said, but it's not till September, so it's good. But yeah, I'll tell Amanda that we're going to stay in contact, and one of us she'll probably reach out to you first. I'm horrible at anything technology. As you can see, people won't know how much struggle we went through just to do this podcast, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Where's my wife?
Well, I mean, it kind of showed when you started the computer, like, hey, honey, can you get my AirPods? Can you help me out here? So that was great. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna plug in all your information below in the podcast link and all that stuff, and I'll definitely on my own page and the podcast page, I'll share as much as I can with your tournament, your charity, your website, and all that. Like I said, whatever little I can do, I'm here to support you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to promoting, this podcast, and I think, again, I can't stress enough, I think it is incredible. The topic you've chosen, the outline of your podcast, I think it is perfect. I look forward to seeing how many other people you talk to and discussions that come up, because I think it's powerful and important. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you, man. Really, it's been an honor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.